Okay, there we go. So good morning. So we are continuing third Perek of Masechet Makkot. We're on Daf Tet Zayin Amud Bet. Tet Zayin Amud Bet. We got up to the two dots. Yes, the two dots. Okay, about halfway down the page, a little bit before halfway down the page. And we go back the next halakha that we had from our Mishnah. So our Mishnah was going through different isurim, different lavim for which one would get Makkot. And the next one is Achel neveilot utreifot shkatzim urmasim. So when he eats all types of non-kosher foods, right? Neveilot and treifot, shkatzim urmasim. Essentially, nevela and treifa refers to could be even kosher animals, right? A kosher species of animal, but a nevela is an animal which has died. Did not undergo shechita. That would be a nevela. A treifa would be even an animal which did undergo shechita. However, it had lesions in the lungs or in other places. It had an illness which makes it a treifa, and it would not, generally speaking, would not survive the year. But nevelot and treifot is generally just a term for non-kosher food, non-kosher meat. But one would eat nevelot and treifot. And also shkatzim or matzim, which refers to insects, all sorts of bugs and insects and things which are certainly not kosher. One would get lashes for that. So says the Gemara, Amar Rav Yehuda, Paima da'achal binita deveikrava malkinan le mishum sheretz hasharetz al haaretz. So somebody who eats, says Rav Yehuda, somebody who eats a benita, is a certain type of worm. It's a worm which is found in cabbage. You eat this worm which is eaten inside the cabbage. You would get Makkot. Malkinane mishum sheretz hasharetz ala aretz. Right? We're going to see shortly. There are a number of different psukim regarding the isur of sheretz, and if somebody was to eat an insect intentionally, so they would transgress not just one lotaseh, but possibly 4, possibly 5, possibly 6. Depending on what it is, and we'll get into this now. This is the reason why, by the way. So you often hear this, you have to check your vegetables. We're coming up to Pesach. Spoke about karpas and maror. A lot of people use lettuce leaves for the maror. That has to be checked. It has to be washed thoroughly so that there are no insects inside. Sometimes you hear people say that eating an insect is 5 times worse than eating non-kosher meat. Right? Why would you say that it's 5 times worse? Again, we don't know which mitzvah is more important and which is less. We have in Pirkei Avot, we have in a number of places, mitzvah kalak, mitzvah chamora. We have to be just as careful to keep what we think is a mitzvah kala, is what we think is a mitzvah chamora. We don't know matan scharan shel mitzvot, but what we do know is that if one was to eat non-kosher meat, that is 1 lav, but if one was to eat a non-kosher insect, that is a number of lavim. So sometimes you hear, and people will say, you have to be so careful to wash your vegetables, which you do, so that there are no insects inside, because if you eat a lettuce leaf with an insect, that is, you have transgressed, 5 different lavim. Now, I'm not sure that is actually the proper way to look at it, because, as we'll see, the Gemara over here says that if somebody was to eat these insects, yes, you would transgress 5 different lavim. That's referring to a situation whereby one eats the insect. There are certain cultures and places in the world where they eat insects for protein, and we know famously that locusts, certain types of locusts, those who have a tradition, would be kosher, but the rest are not. But it's actually something which is becoming more popular in certain places of the world. There's all a move towards alternative proteins and away from eating animals. There are places that they are eating insects. So if you go somewhere and you pick up an insect to eat it, you would certainly have transgressed. If you pick up a lettuce leaf and inadvertently you didn't know there was an insect there, again, you're still not allowed to eat it. But would that be that a person has willfully gone and transgressed 5 isurim? I think it's a little bit of a different definition. In any event, so the Gemara tells us that we have mishum sheretz hasharetz al haaretz, right? That is the pasuk that tells us you have a bug, these things which are creeping, crawling on the ground, that would be forbidden, and that would this worm which is inside the cabbage would be included as part of that. And then the Gemara says, how dachal benita deveikrava. There was a certain person who ate one of these worms from the cabbage. V'nagdei Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda gave him Makkot. Okay, in this case, we should have explained that over here, sometimes we find, although we are learning Masechet Makkot, and we know Makkot for transgressing a love, over here, in order to get Makkot, as we've discussed many times, it's where there is a transgression, where there is a warning, where there are two witnesses. Sometimes when the Gemara says Nagde, it's referring to a different type of lashes, what's called Makat Mardut, which is lashes which is Midrabanan. That has a different, that's a different category, and that's probably what it's referring to over here. Okay, continues the Gemara. Amar Abaye, Achal Putita loke arba'a, Nimala loke chamesh, mishum sheretz hashoretz al haaretz, Tzil'a loke shesh, mishum sheretz ha'of. I hope you've all had breakfast already. So somebody said, Abaye says, somebody who eats a putita, which is a type of insect, which is in the water. I'm not sure exactly what a putita would be in English, but it's an insect that lives in the water. One would get lashed with 4 sets. So each set of 39, kaful arba, times by 4, because there are 4 different isurim in eating that bag. In the mala, for an ant, which is a sheretz, which is a bag which lives on the ground, right? One would get 5, because there's the additional love of what we've just said, sheretz hashoretz ala haaretz, that it swarms on the ground. Sirah, which is maybe a type of hornet or wasp or some sort of flying insect, that would get lokeh shesh, one would get 6 because of sheretz ha'of, because there's an additional pasuk about sheretz ha'of. So have a look at Rashi over here. Right, so Rashi tells us, Achal Putita, Pala sheretz hamayim, somebody who eats this bag from the water, Lokeh arba'a. Why 4? So he says, Shnei lavin ktuvin b'sheretz hamayim. Echad b'turat kohanim, ve'echad b'mishneh Torah. Right, so twice we have the prohibition against sheretz of the water. One is written in Torat Kohanim. Torat Kohanim is Sefer Vayikra, and one is written in Mishneh Torah, which is Sefer Dvarim. Ushnei lavin ktuvim b'sheretz stam, right? And we have two psukim just regarding insects, crawling creatures in general. Right? Lo teshachzu et nafshotechem b'chol hasheretz hashoretz v'lo titam'u b'hem. Right? Those 2 psukim are general prohibitions. They don't specify whether it's on the ground, in the water, etc. So those 2 are always included, and then you have 2 for the water. And therefore, mashma ben sheretz hamayim ben sheretz haaretz halei alba. Therefore, we have 4. Next Rashi says nemala, for an ant, bala nemala chaya. One ate a living ant. Ho'ilu b'ria shleimai achilata b'kolshu. Okay, so Rashi is answering a question here which we might have, which is these insects, right? You're saying that you're going to be chayav malkot, certainly going to be. Gemara will discuss it a little bit more, but certainly it's going to be less than a kazayit. Okay, normally we know. We mentioned before the last Perek of Yoma, there is a machloket between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish about chatzi shiur. So even if you have less than the shiur, we say, like Rabbi Yochanan, that chatzi shiur asur min haTorah. So even if it's less than a kazayit, you're still not allowed to eat it. However, when it comes to punishments, you would not be chayav. So here the punishment is malkot. You would not get punishment less than a kazayit. However, over here, there is a difference. Why? It says, "Elu b'ria shleimai," says Rashi. It is a full creation. We saw this in the Mishnah already, that there's a dinya of a bria, even though it's less than a kazayit, nonetheless, it is an entire creation, and therefore, achilata b'kol shuv velokeh. However, whatever size it is, one would get malkut for it. By the way, this concept of bria, it comes up here in terms of isur. I don't remember if we spoke about before. It also comes up in the realm of permitted eating. If a person is to eat, for example, a grape, right, which is an entire entity, even if it's less than a kazayit, would one have to say a bracha achrona? Normally, we say bracha achrona is only if you eat in a kazayit. But if it's a bria shlema, so you have a safek about whether it is a bracha achrona or not, and therefore the poskim say if you're going to eat an entire grape, rather make sure you eat a kazayit, so you have to say the bracha achrona. Yes,
Rabbi, why does it say bala that he swallowed a whole animal? He didn't eat it up. if he ate it up, he's not chayav in these things?
Right. So seemingly the idea would be that if he swallowed, because he swallowed the whole thing, you're saying that if it was dead, if he ate it up, maybe, a tiny limb or part of it was dislodged, and then or he chewed it up and ground it up. He didn't eat the whole bria in one go, and therefore it would still be asur, but he wouldn't be chayav if he had not eaten a bria shlema.
You have to have a bria in one gulp, or if you eat a whole bria, in two gulps, or three,
Seemingly it's right. Seemingly it's a bria shlema in one go. This is the reason why, by the way, when a lot of let's say vegetables which are very, very hard to clean, things like strawberries, whatever. Again, I'm not getting into now there's machloket poskim. There are those who are more lenient. There are those who are more stringent in terms of what is required. But even the Mahadran Hechsherim, for example, will give you a hechsher for strawberry yogurt, right? And cases where it is ground up. Part of the reason is when things are ground up, even if there were bugs inside, then they are crushed, and they won't be a bria shlema, and therefore all the laws of batel b'shishim, etc., would then apply, right? Part of the din of bria also relates to the shear, and also relates to the din of bitul. Okay, the din here of bitul may be midrabanan. It may be that a bria is batel from the Torah, but midrabanan we say that bria is not batel even be'elef, but certainly in terms of the chiyuv, if one consumed an entire bria shlema in one gulp, that would be that'd be chayav for that.
It's fascinating that answers then one of the age-old questions: what's worse, when you open up an apple and you find a worm inside? If you find only half a worm, so in this case, it's better to find half a worm than to find a full worm. L'chora, according to the logic. Just think about that.
That's a Gemara. All right, very good. Of course, the best would be if you find the whole worm and don't eat it, right? But okay, the Seder. So Rashi continues. He says, "Nemala bala nemala chaya ho'il ubriya shlemai achilata bekolshu." Since it's a bria shlema, whatever shear you ate, you'd be chayav. Veloke chamesh. Here you would get lashes 5 times, right? The point is, again, all of these, what the Gemara is telling us, it's not just an esoteric concept. You've transgressed one love, you've transgressed one mitzvah or 2 mitzvot. No, there's an afkamina. How many malkot are you going to get? So he says, right? As we saw above, there are 2 psukim regarding sheretz just in general. Right, so those are going to apply across the board, right? By the sheretz by the sheretz hamayim, which we said previously, in the water, that is going to be, there are 2 extra psukim regarding the water. Okay, so those 2 are going to fall away, but we have 2 psukim about the sheretz stam, and then in addition, shlosha lavin aktuvin b'sheretz haaretz b'torah kohanim in Sefer Vayikra. We have 3 psukim referring to sheretz hasharetz al haaretz regarding that which crawls on the ground. So therefore, we're going to get 5. When it comes to the tzira, as we said, we're going to get 6. Okay, shesh says Rashi chamesh mishum sheretz haaretz. So with the flying creature, so you've got the 5 already for that which crawls on the ground, because something which flies also goes on the ground. So you have 2 general. 3 specifically for the ground, and then additionally, 5 mishum sheretz ha'of, ve'echad chamesh mishum sheretz haaretz, ve'echad mishum sheretz ha'of, and another one for that which is flying. Tichtiv Mishneh Torah. This comes from Sefer Dvarim. V'chol sheretz ha'of tameu lachem lo yochlu. Right. So that pasuk says. Anything which is any flying creature, also you cannot eat, and therefore we have 6 lavim. Now says Rashi, maybe you would have thought that there should be 7. It says, "Avalo teshakzu et nafshotechem ba'beima u'ba'of." Right? Hakatuv Parashat Kedoshim Tiyu. That we have another pasuk in Parashat Kedoshim where it says, "Lo teshakzu et nafshotechem." Don't make yourselves disgusting by anything from the animal and from that which flies. We're used to translating off as birds. but it really refers to anything that flies. Therefore, it could refer to shratzim as well. So he says this pasuk in Parshat Kedoshim Tiyu eino mina minyan. This we don't count as a separate lav. The lav v'sheretz ktiv. Because that lav is written separately regarding sheretz. Meaning that is coming to include animals and not to include crawling things. That pasuk is referring to large creatures. The sheretz lashon ktana v'nemucha, and the sheretz is something which is small and low. Shenikelet behilucha bekoshi v'niret kelocheshet. The sheretz refers to something which is you can barely see, you can barely tell that it walks. It looks like it's swarming. So that is something different, and therefore that pasuk is not included. So that is the conclusion. Abaye says the sheretz, the crawly, the bugs that fly, that are in the water, you get 4 sets of lashes. Those that are on the ground, you get 5 sets of lashes, and those that are that fly as well, in addition to being on the ground, you would get 6. Now, based on the fact that some of these psukim use the term, one of the general psukim, we said there are 2 general psukim regarding shratzim. One of them says, "Al teshaktsu et nafshotechem b'chol sheretz hashoretz." Don't disgust yourselves. Don't do anything disgusting with any sheretz, any swarming creature. So based on that, we have the Gemara goes into a slight digression, discussion about Baal Teshaktsu. That is a separate prohibition, not to do things which are disgusting. So Amar Rav Achai, Hamashet nekavav over mishom lo teshaktsu. Right, somebody who needs to go to the bathroom and does not, and holds that in for a time, that is part of the prohibition of lo teshaktsu. Amar Rav Bibi bar Abaye, Hai man deshati bekarna dulmana ka'ava mishom lo teshaktsu. Okay, so this is something we don't really have nowadays, but it used to be, certainly in the days of the Gemara. Bloodletting was a very, very common medical treatment. We do it all sorts of things. The Gemara tells us certain occasions when one should do bloodletting, when one should not do bloodletting, to do on Erev Shabbos, that one has to do Netilat Yadayim afterwards, all sorts of halachot. But so the kli, the vessel in which one would let the blood, so that should not be, if somebody was to go and drink from that, obviously not to drink the blood itself, but to go and drink from that cup, that is also going to be a problem of Baal Teshaktsu. Like I say, hopefully this is not something which is really comes up very commonly nowadays, but that is that is the case. Okay, Amar Rav Bibi bar Abaye. Next halacha. Amar Rav Bibi bar Abaye. Sorry, that's what we just read. Hayman deshati bekana do omna ka'avar mishum lo teshaktsu. Amar Rava bar Rav Huna. So Rava bar Rav Huna now says the following thing. Again, going back to our discussion that we had regarding birya, and adding on to that a little bit. So, risek tisha nemalim vehevi achad chai v'shliman kazayet loke 6 mishum birya v'echad mishum kazayet nevela. Okay, so what happens if you had 9 ants? For argument's sake, the point is you have a number of these insects, but they do not together form a kazayet. Obviously, the answer to your question from before, essentially, they're not alive. They are right here. They've been crushed up. Right? Risek tishan malim. Risek, says Rashi, mi'ech v'chitet ubitlan mitorat bria. Right? Once they've been crushed up and they've been ground, they are no longer have the title of birya because it's not a whole creature. So you have these ants which have been crushed, which are not whole, and you bring along another one which is whole, which is alive, which is a birya. Why you'd want to do this, I have no idea, but that's the case. And therefore together, the crushed up ants, which are not a kazayit, and the living ant, which is a birya, is also not a kazayit, but together they are a kazayit. So in this case, says the Gemara, you're going to get 6 sets of lashes, right? Lokesh 6. Why 6? So 5 mishum birya. 5 because of birya, i.e., that whole ant which you consumed, that would be the five different isurim, the 5 different lavim that we mentioned before would therefore apply. And in addition, there'd be one more. Why one more? Echad mishum kazait nevela. Because at the end of the day, you ate a kazait. Nevela over here refers to, again, any impure, any non-kosher animal living species which one consumed. Because there was here a kazait, that is going to be a separate prohibition, and therefore there are going to be six malchut. Rava Amar Yochanan, afilu shnayim v'hu. Right? Rava says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, it doesn't have to be 9, even if it's only 2, right? And this one, the same thing would apply. Rav Yosef Amar afilu echad v'hu. Okay, and even if it's 1, so you had 1 ant which was crushed up and 1 which was a beria, also together you would still get the 6 malchut. And then it says the Gemara v'lo pligi, there is no machloket here. Haba Rav Raveh. Right? They're talking about different metziut, different types of insects. One is talking about where it's very large. So where it's very large, just having 2 together would be enough to make up a kazayit. And habazutre, where it's very small, then you would have 9, and together with another 1, that would be the kazayit. Says Rashi, filu shnayim merusakim, that are crushed up, even 2. V'hu im gdolim. That's where they are large, so that there is a kazayit between all 3. As we just explained, there's no machloket. Just the previous Rashi there before, because we had said that if you take the ants which are crushed up and then you have another bag which is alive and whole, you swallow it, that would be chayav malchut for a kazayit nevela. Nevela is something which is died. So he says, when you swallow it, it dies, obviously, and then it joins into the kazait. All right. After that very appetizing piece of Gemara, we'll now move on to the next halacha from our Mishnah. And the next halacha is achal tevel umaser rishon. So you remember the Mishnah discussed the case whereby if one ate a tevel, this is also something where one would get malchut for, right? Tevel, which is food produce where the trumot and maasrot have not been separated from it. So again, just a very, very quick overview once again of what the trumot and maasrot that we separate. First, you have truma gdola, which is taken off and is given to the kohen. Truma gdola, there is no measurement for it. A kol shehu would suffice. That needs to be eaten batara. Then you have maser rishon, the first tithe, which is 1/10 of what is left. That is given to the Levi. From the Maser Rishon, Trumat Maser needs to be separated. So the Maser which the Levi receives, he needs to separate Truma from that to give to the Kohen. And then you have the second tithe. Now this changes depending on which year we are in. If it's in year 1, 2, 4, or 5 of the Shemitah cycle, that then Maser Sheni is separated. Maser Sheni, which is again needs to be eaten b'tara, needs to be brought to, one can keep that and bring it to Yerushalayim and eat it b'tara within the walls, or if one prefers, one can be podeh, one can switch over, so to speak, the sanctity of that food onto money, which then has to be donated, but then one can eat it. And in the 3rd and the 6th year, we have Maser Ani. That is the second tithe, which is given to the poor. Okay, of course, in the Shemitah year, there are no Trumot or Masrot. There is an interesting discussion. What happens if you rely on the Hatem Mechira, and therefore the sanctity is sort of removed, where it's not owned by a Jew? Would you then have to remove Trumot and Masrot in the Shemitah year? But in any event, so we're talking here about Maser Ani. And the question the Gemara asks is as follows. Amarav, Achal Tevel Shel Maser Ani. So what happens if you have Tevel of Maser Ani? Meaning that this food is Tevel in the sense that Maser Ani has not been separated from it. All the other Masrot have been separated, but not Maser Ani. So says Rav, Achal Tevel Shel Maser Ani Loteh, that one would get malchut for this, i.e. that this is still considered Tevel. Right? What we might have thought that Tevel only applies. There are certain Maasrot and Trumot which need to be given to the Kohen, which need to be kept in Tahara, right? Maser Ani is different. So maybe we thought that, yes, there is a monetary chov, there is a monetary obligation one has to give it to the poor, but it doesn't have the status of Tevel anymore. Says Rav, no, that is not true. This would still be Tevel, you would still get malchut if you ate it before separating Maser Ani. Right, Rashi says over here, tevel shel maser ani sheufreshu kol masrotav chutz mizeh. You've separated everything else except for this. Look at, you would still get Makkot. Ve'af agav the maser ani ein bo kedusha sheharei lezarim nechal. Right, this is the point. This is where the question comes from. Maser ani does not have kedusha, and therefore a zar, a stranger, anybody could eat it. And it can be eaten in any place. Nonetheless, it's still this is still considered tevel. So asks the Gemara, Kaman. So which opinion in the Tanaim does this follow? It says Ki Haytana Detanya, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Yachol lo yeh chayav ela ala tevel shelo ra mimena kolika. I might have thought that, says Rabbi Yossi, that one would only be chayav, it's only considered tevel when you haven't separated anything from it. You haven't separated truma gdola, that's the first thing. Once you've begun to separate, once you've set aside truma, it's no longer tevel. That's the havamina, right? Yachol lo yeh chayav ela ala tevel shelo ra mimena kolika. Hura mimeno truma gdola, v'lo hura mimeno maser rishon, but if you've separated Truma Gdola, but not yet Maser Rishon, or Maser Rishon v'lo Maser Sheni, you've separated Maser Rishon, but have not yet separated Maser Sheni. V'afilo Maser Ani, and even Maser Ani, right? There's more of a chidush by Maser Ani, because as we said, Maser Sheni has to be eaten, Biktusha has to be eaten in a certain place, unlike Maser Ani. He says Minayin. So how do we know that even if only those latter tithes have not been separated, that it is still considered tevel? Because it says, right, we have two psukim. The first one says, both of these are regarding Trumot and Masrot. The first pasuk says, "Lo tuchal lechol b'sharecha," you will not be able to eat within your gates. It continues the pasuk, "Maser degancha v'tiroshcha v'tzarecha uvkorot b'kara v'tzonecha v'chon darecha asher tidov v'nidvotecha trumat yadecha." Right, all sorts of maasrot and nedavot and things which have to be brought to the Beit HaMikdash, which you won't be allowed to eat. And then the next pasuk says, "Itchalel aseret kol maser tvuatcha b'shana shlishit." When you conclude to separate all the maaser from your produce in the third year, shnata maaser, v'natata lalevi v'lager le'atom v'la'amana v'yachlu b'sharecha v'saver. That pasuk is certainly referring to maaser ani. It's talking about that which you give to the poor and that to those who need it. And it says, right, it's connected to the first pasuk which says, lo tuchal lechol, you won't be able to eat. So we say like this, mala ala maaser ani. Afkan Maser Ani, just like the second pasuk there is referring to Maser Ani, so too here it's referring to Maser Ani. Says Rashi, Malahalan Maser Ani, Dichtiv Lager Leatom V'La'amana. Right, it says you'll give it to the convert, to the orphan, to the widow, to those who are poor, who are less fortunate. Ubinyane Deshana Shlishit. So Af, and that is in the third year. So Af Bishalecha Mulkan. Even the previous pasuk that says Bisharecha yesh le'mod mimeno maser ani. You learn that is also referring to maser ani. V'achi kamar, and this is what it means to say lo tuchal le'achol tevel be'od shamaser betucho. You cannot eat tevel when it's still got the maser as part of it. Shekatav bo bisharecha. So that is how we learn that this is considered tevel as well. Right? Says the Gemara, Malahalan, 4 lines from the bottom. Malahalan Masani, Afkan Masani. Just as over there it's referring to Maser Ani, so to here it's referring to Maser Ani. Ve'amarach mana lo tuchal. The pasuk said you cannot eat it. Okay. So I think that's a good place to start. Ad Kan for today. We'll see you all again tomorrow, same time, same place, once again at 9 o'clock. We'll have a share tomorrow and the next day. I think next week there won't be a share, and it will be resuming after Pesach. But the rest of this week at 9 o'clock, everybody have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Nice to see everybody.